guess as a reminder, once we finish chapter 3, we'll go ahead and do the test. But well, we'll just see how far. We'll see how quick we get through this. I mean, and like usual, we'll have study days, so it's not like it's gonna jump on us. I can think anything from you. Okay. All right. So, chapter 3 is Hellenistic Ages, which is, well, post Greece. Sort of. In a way, it's kind of a continuation of Greece, just under new leadership. So, following the Peloponnesian War, Athens was ruled by the 30 tyrants, kept Athenians in check with a small Spartan garrison. It was then replaced by the 10 oligarchs. Most of this is Athenian writing, so they were very dramatic in, oh, we're being ruled over by 30 tyrants. Oh, it was basically just a Spartan garrison to keep Athens from becoming an empire again. By 403, which is like literally a year after Athens was put down by Sparta, the Athenians overthrew this oligarchy and restored their democracy, which, okay. But just because they've got their democracy back doesn't mean they've got, well, all their clout back. Their prestige and their fortune from the Athenian Empire was gone. Sure, they could rebuild their walls. Sure, they could have their democracy. But their empire was gone. The Athenian Empire of pretty much most of Greece had been dissolved, and the majority of the other Greek polis were not intent on joining back up with Athens in that venture. So, unfortunately for Sparta, in stopping Athens from being an empire and securing freedom for the rest of Greece, they now had to enforce this freedom. In other words, the various Greek polis were all now pushing for some level of supremacy, many of them working with Persia or involving themselves in Persian affairs. There was so what was it exactly? Let's see. Here we are. Cyrus the Younger, seeking to overthrow his brother Artaxerxes of Persia, hired Greek hoplite mercenaries to help him make his claim, etc., etc. So, while Cyrus was slain by his brother's forces, and the Greeks were left leaderless, they were able to make their way out of Persia relatively unscathed, which is pretty remarkable considering how large Persia is and how many forces Persia has. But that 10,000 Greek soldiers, mercenaries, I should say, same thing, can make their way back, implied to the rest of Greece that Persia was weak and easy to deal with. So Sparta attempted to attack Persia. Sparta had the same mistake that Athens did. Attempted to fight Persia. Persia beat the crap out of Sparta. And then while Sparta was busy doing that, there was an attempted uprising in 397, which is not what Sparta wants, and Sparta returned to Peloponnesus and went back to what it's always done and concentrated on keeping its slaves from rebelling. So, yes, question mark, Sparta was victorious, but because of how Sparta was as a Greek polis, they couldn't really capitalize on it. And in fact, in order to keep things from going into chaos, they had to push themselves beyond what they were able to do. So again, various other conflicts erupted. Corinthian War had Athens, Corinth, Thebes, and Argos all allying against Sparta. Sparta completely whipped them, but because, again, Sparta has a very small military, they weren't able to hold on to any territory and had to pull back to Peloponnesus. So this is very much a we won the battle but could not win the war, which actually we'll get to. We'll actually talk about Pyrrhus over Pyrrhus later. So, like, you win every battle in a war, but you can't win the war because you don't have enough guys to, like, hold on to the land that you won. That's rough. Athens rebuilt its navy, its walls, allied with Persia against Sparta. Persia had gotten tired of this and basically forced a peace on Greece in 387. Because again, Persia was busy with other stuff. They were getting tired of getting involved with Greek affairs, so they essentially forced Athens and Sparta to play nice. There was a brief moment of Theban dominance, which further weakened Sparta, and with the death of their general Epaminondas, Theban dominance did wane. So it was really their one guy was pushing things, and after he died, they kind of lost their momentum. But we will actually come back to him in just a little bit. Some Frank Miller Spartans here. All right. So that's what's going on in Greece. Just a lot of back and forth, nothing really sticking. And now on to what's happening a bit further north. So up in northern Greece, there was this area called Macedonia. Well, it's still called Macedonia. Which was considered semi-civilized. They were still doing a lot of like tribal warfare. And blood feuds, they spoke a dialect of Greek that the Athenians would barely be able to recognize. They were, well, no, because barbarian is technically a Latin term. But it was, they were like these half wild, you know, just not quite cavemen, but, you know, they were very much behind the Greeks in terms of technological and cultural growth. However, we have Philip. He was the uncle and guardian of the Macedonian king and spent his childhood down in Thebes. He learned from Epaminondas, the guy that I just mentioned in the previous slide, who had been the main guy in charge of Thebes when it was very much almost in charge of Greece, very briefly. So he learned these military tactics from one of the best Greek generals in history, and returned to Macedonia and began modeling the Macedonian army after this. They took over nearby Thrace for its rich gold deposits, so now they not only have what will be considered modern Greek tactics and deployment techniques, but also money to outfit their army. So they went from, again, like almost tribal people to really, really modern, really fast. So by 352, so we're looking at here, not even 7 years after he left from Thebes, he pushed this professional Macedonian army, improved tactics and equipment, and willingness to engage in total warfare, which was not something that we usually saw in Greece, where they'd fight day and night, summer and winter, and chase fleeing foes, which, again, was not normally how things were done in Greece. You only fought during the day. You only fought during the summer. And when the enemy broke and ran, you stopped fighting. You just, if they retreated, that was it. However, Philip's army did not do that. They were there to win. They were there to chase you down and put a spear in you. And his intention was to unite all of fragmented Greece under his rule, similar to Persia, but he had a bit more inside information on Greece. I mean, again, he'd grown up in Thebes. He had seen Thebes at the height of its power. He had seen how they had ruled over much of Greece. And technically, Macedon was part of Greece, sort of. So it was more than, he wasn't quite an outside invader. Although for a lot of the Greeks he was, but whatever. Tomato, tomato. So again, what we would consider, ancient Greece down here, not even really this far west, but this bit of islands here, Lydia and Ionia over here, Persian Empire there. Here's Macedonia, and then here's Thrace that they took over for its gold. So Macedonia is big now, and they moved their way south to hit Greece from the north. Here's Philip of Macedon. This is from, I'm assuming, one of the Total War games. I think do I have another picture of? No. The book actually has, I think they were able to find his skull and, rebuild what his face looked like. He looks a bit better here than he does in the facial reconstruction they have in the book, because he took a spear to the face. That's why he's missing an eye. Let's see. His collarbone was shattered by a lance, lame in his right leg, an arm permanently damaged, and most striking of all, his right eye lost to an arrow. Okay, not a spear, an arrow. He had been in a lot of fights, and his body showed it. He was in bad shape. But he had a strong mind, and he knew how to use it. However, with Philip making his way down into Greece, and in his mind, he was going to unite them for their own good. The Greeks were, of course, divided on the idea. They can't agree on anything. Some guy, the book mentions Demosthenes and whatever, two like great orators that disagreed on how they thought they saw Philip, um, which was pretty indicative of just the Greek city-states in general. Is some of them were like, hey, this is just going to be another Persia, while other guys were like, hey, Philip uniting Greece would be a pretty good idea, actually. So, once again, they can't agree on anything. Athens obviously tried to form alliances against Philip, um, one of which was Olynthus. Philip made a Philip made an example of Olynthus, went in and wiped it out, like to the last stone. There are no ruins of Olynthus left. So Athens called for peace, and there was a 5-year peace accord after 346. So for 5 years, they were going to not fight each other, but of course, in those 5 years, everyone started plotting and planning and using that time to try to take advantage of the other. So, I mean, this is just classic Greek stuff going on. Philip was sending agents into the various city-states to try to get support, to have the Greeks join him if and when the fighting recommenced, to try to get as many people on his side as possible. I mean, I'm sure there was some small part of Philip that was like, hey, maybe we can not fight at all. That'd be great, but he knew that there were going to be enough people that were going to fight against him that he was going to have to fight. But hey, the more people on his side, the better, right? Athens, of course, was suspicious of the absolute power of how the Macedonian model worked and rallied against him, which is funny considering we just got rid of the Athenian Empire, but whatever. Not that Athens isn't ever hypocritical, right? This all eventually culminated in 338 at the Battle of Chaeronea. Philip's Macedonian army of 30,000 infantry and several thousand cavalry under the command of his son Alexander, who, I don't know, probably isn't going to be important, crushed the allied forces of Athenians, Thebans, Corinthians, and Phocians. Still, though, Philip knew that he was going to have to rule these guys, so he treated most of the Greeks pretty leniently, returned their bodies to their cities, allowed Athens to retain its traditional territory, created a Hellenic confederacy and compelled the Polis to join it, which is to say, join this new club I'm making or we're going to burn your city down. Now, I would like to mention that it does say here that he treated the Greeks fairly, except for the Thebans. Any guesses as to why he was harsh against the folks from Thebes? Anything in Philip's past that would make him harsh against Thebes? That's right. He grew up there. So therefore, why would, since he grew up in Thebes, why would he be harsh on the Thebes for fighting him? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know Philip's mind, but if he grew up there and like he saw the Thebes as, I don't know necessarily as an extension of his people, but like as his friends, but now they're fighting against him. yeah, you sort of take that personally, right? At least that's my mindset on it. Is like, yeah, he feels betrayed. He feels like he takes that a little personally. Um, I don't know. Maybe he also feels like the Thebans should be stronger than this. Yeah, he was very unhappy with the fact that they didn't join him um, on his side of the battlefield and fight against the Greeks, the rest of the Greeks. But he was pretty lenient with everyone else because, again, he wanted to make sure that they're not going to try to rise up again because we don't need more of that. This is a pretty basic outline of the Battle of Chaironeia, with Philip and the Macedonian horse brigade pulling the Athenians off, while Alexander and the Thessalians push in and hit them from the flank. The Thebans have to deal with the rest of the Thessalians as well. So, it's a pretty simple, like, divide and conquer scenario. Spoiler, Philip wasn't around very long. Philip sent an advance party into Persia, because as soon as he got done fighting in Greece, he was like, all right, well, we're going to go to Persia next. Just not even, like, he didn't make a capital in Greece. He didn't settle down for a little while. He's like, all right, Persia next. In October 336, he got assassinated by one of his bodyguards. Hold on, let me see. Is that the same year? No, it was okay. It was at least 2 years later. I was going to say, if Chaironeia was in August and then the assassination was in October, they didn't wait long at all. Okay, it was at least 2 years. So yeah, dude gets shanked by one of his bodyguards. We don't really know why. We don't know what, like, the real reason behind this was. There wasn't a whole lot of evidence. I'm pretty sure, like, the bodyguard got killed immediately after. So there wasn't a whole lot of evidence left behind. That said, plenty of folks were totally fine with this. There weren't a whole lot of people, like, trying to get to the bottom of it, because most people were pretty cool with it, including his son Alexander, because Philip had recently remarried, and due to Macedonian law, his new wife and the new child that he had were now, like, ahead of his older son in terms of, like, taking power. I think I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we'll get to what his mom gets up to. Obviously, the Athenians were plenty happy with this because, hey, Philip's gone. Don't worry about him anymore. We didn't even have to do it. Maybe it probably wasn't the Athenians. I feel like if it was the Athenians, they would have said something. They were too proud to not. Like, oh boy, sure is a shame what happened to Philip. The guy that, and then they would have, like, let slip some like, really detailed information about the assassin. It's like, oh, it sure was a shame that, like, this guy that's from this very specific, like, township in this specific place. It's like, nobody knew that, but sure, go on, Athens. Yeah, obviously the Persians were like, okay, well, we don't have to deal with this guy anymore, so cool. Yeah, everybody was pretty chill with it. So here's Philip getting shanked in the throat. Again, he could barely walk. One of his arms didn't work. He was blind in one eye. Dude was stabbing a cripple. I mean, it was kind of rough. Yeah. So real quick, the book goes into a, like, cultural section. So I'm just going to real briefly do that. I really hate turning away from like historical events to, anyway, let's talk about the culture real quick. It's like, but Philip literally just got stabbed. The dude's not even like cold yet. We're gonna talk about freaking like Socrates? Yeah, sure, man. Come on. Anyway, here's Socrates. He had this concept of individualism. He didn't actually write like much at all. In fact, I don't want to say there's a chance he didn't exist, but there's a chance he didn't exist. Because he, again, like if he wrote at all, we can't find hardly any of it. Most of his teaching was, as we mentioned in the previous chapter, was just oral. He'd walk around and talk at people, and that tends to not get recorded real well when you don't have any sort of auditory or recording devices. So it was his students writing down stuff about him that is why we know about him. The Socratic method is where he would ask questions and draw the answers from the students, which Socrates, how should I put this? Socrates was kind of a pain in the ass. You never really get a straight answer from him. He'd be like, okay, well, what do you think? I'm like, you're the smart ass here, tell me. You're the philosopher. But he was intelligent, obviously. He started this whole thing. But also he was very hard-headed. He did something that pissed off the Athenians, and they were like, okay, well, we're going to either we're going to exile you from Athens, or you're going to drink this poison. And he's like, I'm going to drink the poison. And the Athenian authority was like, you don't even have to go very far. You can just like be outside the walls of Athens, like literally. You can build your little academy outside of Athens. Just leave. He's like, nope, I'm drinking the poison. So he drank the poison because he was just that dramatic. Plato, he's the reason we really know much about Socrates, because he was one of Socrates' students and did so much writing about him. So he took Socrates' method a step further, and this was honestly how we do a lot of, I would say, science, but even just research level writing today, where you take the thesis, which is what you think the answer is going to be, and then the antithesis, which is the opposite of that, and then you work through it to find the synthesis or the solution, the end result. Now, in this example, it would be more philosophical, but it can be used in, again, obviously science. It can be used in historical writing, from my own experience. It can be used in all sorts of stuff. I mean, hell, even like literature, where it's like, oh, well, I think the author meant this, but maybe they meant this, and then you work through it and figure out what the end result is. And as I said, he's the main reason we know about Socrates at all, because he wrote a lot about Socrates. So it's possible that Socrates may have been more or less one way or the other, and Plato just had like a biased view of Socrates. So we don't know. That's the problem with a dude never writing things down, is that the views we're going to have are going to be kind of biased. But hey, what are you going to do? He also built an academy outside of Athens. This was sort of what Socrates was going to do, but Athens got pissed with him, and so he's just like, screw it, I'm going to drink poison. And again, Socrates. I think the reason Athens got mad at him is, like the whole thing was, what was it? put on trial for impiety, introducing new gods and for corrupting young minds. Yeah, because, of course. Um, and then we have Aristotle. He was originally from Macedonia. He probably knew Philip personally, not to say Macedonia was this little place and everybody knew each other. But based on the time and what part of Macedonia he was from, and the fact that he was like a philosopher and was probably in the Macedonian court, he probably hung out with Philip. Oops. He was more about the sciences than Socrates and Plato. Again, Socrates and Plato were more about like philosophy and humanity's place in the cosmos, and what is a man? A plucked chicken, that sort of thing. Whereas Aristotle was a bit more sciencey, a bit more like why does light do what light does, and why do things fall when you let them go, and let's see what year this was. 300. This would have been around the time of the guy that I can't remember his name. Oh no, we talk about him later. Never mind. I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't worry about it. And he was a student of Plato, and also was a supporter of Greece coming together under Philip, and then eventually Alexander. So he was fine with what was going on, which again, he probably knew Philip personally. He was aware of Philip's goals and Philip as a person. And he believed that a unified Greece would be safer for everybody, especially with a power like Persia out there. I mean, and even Carthage, which had never really been too aggressive against Greece, was still out there. Like, Carthage was powerful. So here is Socrates going to take the hemlock poison, and everyone being really dramatic about it. I know it's supposed to be like everyone's distraught over Socrates. I mean, he's literally about to take his own life, and they're about to lose like this great mind because he's too stubborn to just leave Athens. But at the same time, I like how if you can take it a different way and look at some of the faces they're making, and they just seem annoyed. They're like, okay, fine. If you're going to be this stubborn, then just take the freaking hemlock poison. Whatever. Shit yourself to death. I don't care. I don't have anything on Plato or Aristotle, apparently. But anyway, on to what the chapter's about. Alexander the Great. So after Philip got shanked, Alexander started securing power. His mother, Olympias, made sure that Philip's most recent wife and child would not be a concern by roasting them alive. So, whereas, as we'll see with like the Romans, where they would just, send the guards in to shank people, which, it's an easier way to die. No, she's just like, no, let's stick them in. It probably wasn't like the brass bull, like you see in, movies and stuff. But it was similar. It was like, no, we're going to make sure they're alive, and we're going to cook them. Yeah, and the child was probably, if not an infant, like a toddler at the time. Like it wasn't great. So they're gone. Great. Thebes decided to once again rise up against Athens. Rise up with Athens' support, because Athens, of course, is always causing trouble. And Alexander completely destroyed Thebes. which again is different from when Persia burned down Athens' Acropolis. There was still stuff left. This is, if you go to Thebes today, there's like an outline of the city, but there is no standing anything. They destroyed it all. So, Greece was now less likely to try to rise up against Alexander, because clearly he was very much like his old man and was willing to completely wipe out a city. And Alexander made his way into Persia and began completely whipping regional governors just back to back. Just battle after battle. It was pretty one-sided. Also, while he was there, let me see here. They have a separate thing here. Here we are. 334 assembled an army of 50,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. Sizable navy carried him across the Hellespont. The young king was first to step ashore, casting a spear into Asian soil, announcing symbolically he intended to take Asia by force. Because again, they're dramatic. First battles on Darius, great king of Persia, various satraps. Where's the? Where's the? Oh, here we go. Oh no, that's Egypt. Where's the? Oh, here we go. Marched into Phrygia in 333 and headed for the capital city, Gordium. Legend said that it contained a wagon dedicated to Zeus, and that whoever could untie the rope that knotted its yoke would rule all of Asia. Alexander couldn't resist the challenge, but the knot was unmovable, and so Alexander, not to be denied his destiny, severed the Gordian knot with his sword. Which, anybody could have done. Anybody could take a sword to a bundle of rope, but as the book put it, only Alexander dared to do so. Because, this was like dedicated to, what the big daddy god that you will zap you for messing with his stuff. But Alexander literally believed himself descended from the gods, and he would prove it by audaciously severing the Gordian knot in whatever way he could. And he did. He finally battled Darius at Issus in Cilicia. Darius III was the leader of Persia at the time. However, due to the sheer size of here we go. Due to the sheer size of Darius's army, Darius was able to get away. Darius fled when the assault came too close to his huge arm. His army was outnumbered. Alexander concentrated his attack on Darius himself, which, as luck would have it, worked. Darius fled when the assault came too close, and his huge army retreated in chaos. Alexander did seize Darius' rich baggage train and his family, which had been abandoned as the great king fled. Alexander treated them kindly, in essence replacing Darius as their protector and patron, and is supposed to have ordered them to learn Greek. But hey, he caused Darius to retreat in a battle where Darius very much should have had the advantage. Oops. So, after Darius ran off, Alexander decided to take a quick detour down to Egypt, was able to take it from Persia pretty easily, and while heading to a, let's see, well, I say relatively easily. Alexander spent 6 months fighting the port city of Tyre, enslaved its population, crucified thousands as a warning. Jesus. Anyway, did make it to Egypt. Egypt, pleased to be rid of Persian control, welcomed Alexander without a fight, became the new king, honored the Egyptian gods. Let's see. When he visited Siwa in Libya to consult the oracle of Zeus Ammon, there at the famous oasis, Alexander entered the sanctuary where the priests addressed him as the son of Ra, which I haven't talked about this before, but like for the Greeks, and especially for Alexander, when they encountered other religions, especially other like polytheistic religions, when another religion said, "Oh, may this such and such God bless you," and they've been, okay, well, where does this God fit in your pantheon? It's like, oh, well, this is the chief God that rules all the others. It's like, okay, well, that's just this. It's like, you call him something different, that's cool, do what you want, but we understand that as Zeus. They weren't like, you have to call him Zeus because that's what we do. The Egyptian priest said, Ra. Alexander's like, cool, that means Zeus. But the implication being, Alexander's the son of Zeus now, and therefore is a god. Because, I mean, Zeus got around. Who knows? He laid the groundwork for Alexandria, which is going to be very important going forward. Set up a garrison, and then made his way back to Persia. So, yeah, he got a lot done in Egypt in a short period of time. But Alexandria is going to be very important for quite some time. Granted, he named a lot of cities Alexandria. But this is the important. This is the big Alexandria. All right. This is the mural that's shown in the book that is probably the best depiction we have of Alexander the Great, as well as Darius, actually. So here's Alexander over here with the like very Greek, like clean-cut face. And then I believe this is supposed to be Darius up here. But realizing, oh, geez, the Greeks are really close. We need to leave. And, like, he's pulling, they're pulling the chariots away to run from the advancing Greek army. Yeah, this is, like, the most clear depiction of Alexander we have to this day. And it's just a really good image of, like, that particular battle. So, Alexander again defeated Darius in 331 with his army of 70,000 against, depending on who you ask, 250,000 to 1.5 million. Obviously, somebody's exaggerating. But, oh, good gracious. But, obviously, either way, Alexander's men were extremely outnumbered. But they were a better fighting force, and it seems like the Babylonians or the Persians were getting real tired of fighting for Darius. So they liberated Babylonia. By the end of 331, they had taken Persepolis, which was the capital of Persia, and by this point, Alexander's men were getting tired of fighting too. I mean, you can win all day long, but you're going to eventually get tired of marching across foreign land and fighting all the time. And because traditionally, especially back then, particularly, when you take an enemy city, you're supposed to, like, by right of war, loot the place and then burn it to the ground. Like, you're supposed to take whatever you want and then burn it, because that's just to show, like, how much you conquer the place. But Alexander, wanting to rule over this place later on, was like, no, we need to keep this stuff intact. And his people were getting really annoyed. So finally they get to Persepolis, and he's like, okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to take all the valuable stuff out. You guys can keep it, it's fine. And then we're going to go into the palace, we're going to have a big party, everybody's going to get drunk, and then I'm going to tell everybody that you accidentally started a fire and burned the palace down. That's fine. We're not going to use this as the capital anyway. So, like, they didn't burn the city down, they burned the palace down. And it was after a heavy night of drinking, so Alexander could claim it was by accident. But his men got what they wanted. They managed to save, like, all the valuable stuff and, keep it. And the city didn't get burned down. So, like, everybody wins, except for, Darius. But Darius is still on the run. Except for this part, by 330, Alexander set out to try to find Darius again, because, again, Persia's huge. Persia's like most of the Middle East at this point, and they're on foot, well, horseback. Darius's men were very much tired of all of this, and stabbed him to death and left him in the road for Alexander to find. Like, hey, I mean, I imagine they tied him up like a Christmas turkey and, left a sign on him, hey, Alexander, this is for you. Alexander, though, being Alexander, was not done and continued making his way east towards India to, quote, punish those who had betrayed Darius, not to avenge Darius, but because people betraying their king can't be allowed to get away with such treason, regardless of who the king was. Which is to say, he was using it as an excuse to continue pushing eastward towards India, because he was going to conquer the whole friggin' world if he could. Anyway, here's the battle in 331 as a bas relief. Just lots of chaos, lots of people just getting run over by the end of it. It was rough. I mean, not that any battle isn't, but yeah, it was bad news. So Alexander keeps moving on, keeps going towards India, returns to Babylonia after, I guess, taking out the men that killed Darius. He sets up Babylonia as the capital, and started planning on invading Arabia. So they didn't quite get to India yet. That was on the table. But he's like, hey, we hadn't started pushing into Arabia yet. Let's do that. All that desert. Let's do that. However, in June of 323, Alexander and his boys had a little bit too much to drink, and because everybody had a little malaria back then, Alexander just died at I want to say 33, 34 years old. Just straight up cacked it. Yeah. there's a section in the book on page 87 about this, but you don't worry about that. Obviously, the Macedonians very quickly changed their plans. They began consolidating what they had because, well, they were just running roughshod over everything rather than like setting up towns and governments and laws and whatnot. All these plans to conquer Arabia and even Carthage, which was even further west. Like Carthage is along northern Africa. That's way west. Yeah, they weren't going to deal with that. They were tired. Everybody, it looked like everybody in Macedonia was tired. So they were like, yeah, we're not dealing with this. Forget it. Just no. So there's Alexander. I guess realizing he's had too much to drink, and everybody's either freaking out because, oh man, this guy that's like led us to the ends of the earth is mortal. We kind of forgot about that. While a few others are like, oh, we need to start thinking about what's going to happen once this guy's gone. Because, I mean, he's clearly not, he's on his way out. We got to start setting stuff up. Crap. That's a lot of work. So, let's briefly talk about what happened after he died. What we got out of all of this. So pretty immediately, this huge empire broke apart. It broke into its component parts, and each region was ruled by either a general or appointed governors that had been there pretty much from the start and kind of created their own little dynasties. They were still Greek-like, that's what Hellenistic means, but they were not a single unified power anymore. Also, Alexander's wife, Roxanne, delivered a boy named him Alexander after her husband died. And both of them were murdered in 311 by order of Cassander, who was in charge of Macedonia because they didn't want another Alexander. So there's a lot of like freshly born children and their mothers being murdered at this time, which happens a lot in Rome too. So yeah, this is the land we're talking about here. This is what Alexander and his men conquered in the course of, 20 years? Well, I mean, I guess technically Philip conquered this part, had Greece. Alexander put down Alexander put down an uprising, and then just did all this. And he was planning on taking Arabia. He was planning on going further west to Carthage, which again is like, it's not. I can't even wouldn't even have it on the board. It would be way over there. All right. So let's talk about each of the parts and yeah. So Greater Greece, which is to say Greece and like Macedonia, it tended to be the most difficult to deal with because it's Greece. They're always difficult. Lots of internal divisions. They had a bunch of people in charge temporarily. Eventually, Antigonus the One-Eyed rose above the others by 319, so he ended up in charge. So what you'll need to know here is like who ended up in charge of each of these areas. Makes for easy multiple choice for me. And from the looks of it, we'll be able to finish this chapter by Wednesday. So I'll go ahead and put this up on Blackboard when we finish. And we'll finish this on Wednesday, and then we'll do the study guide on Monday, and have the test next Wednesday. So anyway, we got a few more of these to go, but just based on where we're at in the slides and the time we have left, and even I'm still going to let you guys out early, there's not much of the chapter left. Anyway, Egypt. Ruled by Ptolemy the First, which was one of Alexander's generals, and really created the Ptolemaic dynasty. This was pretty easy to maintain because Egypt had been, for centuries, really, really heavily ordered and lots of resources. It also had Alexandria now, which was this center of commerce and culture. Yeah, it stuck around for, longer than anybody else. It was a good 300 years that the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt lasted. Which, for Egyptian lengths of time is not that long, but compared to everybody else, it stuck around the longest. Then we had the Seleucid Kingdom, which was Seleucus the First, another of Alexander's commanders. He seized Babylonia in 312, and by 303 controlled most of what was left of Alexander's empire. So, the Seleucid Kingdom is the rest of the empire, which is to say most of Persia. Yeah, it's BC, so we're going down. Yeah. Once we switch over, it starts making more sense. BC is still weird. It was the largest, but that still made it pretty unstable. By the 200s, pieces of it started to fall away. Either areas were, that's the next slide. Either areas would declare independence because they were too far away from Babylonia to be under direct control, or the other two Hellenistic kingdoms would simply take land from the Seleucid kingdom because it was too large to properly fully defend it. So being the biggest wasn't always the best. You had a hard time fully defending and administering all of that. But, and for me, this is the most interesting of all, is kind of everybody else is beyond these main Hellenistic kingdoms. There were still areas that were controlled by Greek or Greek-like rulers, because again, Hellenistic means Greek-like, where it's not necessarily like a Greek king that's ruling the place, but the Greek culture has spread into that area. And the best example, and again, page 90 has a good example of this, but I'm not expecting everybody to have this book because it's out of print for some reason. But there are Greek-like coins that made their way into Western India for hundreds of years after Alexander's empire fell apart, and that's pretty cool. I think I've got more pictures of it later, but we'll talk about Hellenization next time. But the point is, like the Greek coins we saw before, where they're printed on both sides, and one side has like the ruler's face, the other side has something important to the society, like before it had like the chariot race guy, or like an animal or something. That was Greek coins specifically. That was how Greek coins were minted. Other places had metal coins that they used, but they weren't specifically minted like that. But that style of coin made it into Western India due to its proximity to parts of Alexander's empire, and the idea spread beyond the borders. And the people, they were like, oh, this is cool, this is a neat idea, let's do that. And so the culture, if not the empire, spread into the neighboring regions, which is really cool. Like, that's so far beyond what I could ever cover in this class, but the idea of culture spreading beyond, like, the borders of a country, or like, because when you think of like people spreading the culture, it's usually like at the behest of an army or something. But oftentimes it's just trade. They were just trading with the people, and the people are like, oh, these coins are cool. We should make our coins like this. So you'll see coins in India that have on one side a face, and then on the other side like an elephant, or maybe some Hindu god, which is clearly not Greek, but the way the coin is made is the way the Greeks made their coins. So it was Greek-style coins in India. It's so cool. I really like it. It's one of the things. It's one of the things in history that like really, really gets me. So yeah, so there was this spread of culture beyond even what Alexander had tried. Anyway, we'll get into Hellenization, which is the spread of Greek everything, next time. Because, like I said, we don't have much of the chapter left. I'll go ahead and put the PowerPoint up on Blackboard, and might as well put the study guide up too, and we'll do that on Wednesday, at least the rest of the PowerPoint. I don't think we'll worry about the study guide. And then we'll do that next week. So I'll see y'all then.